back to Allison Customs Project Car TV. This is going to be episode 3 on Dustin's Mustang. What we're doing is a complete sheet metal rebuild, if you will. The floors need to come out. We've already got the quarters off, but we need to get the rest of the C-pillar off. Trunk floor needs to come out. Both inner and outer wheel tubs are coming out. We are mini tubbing the car, and we've got a full floor and a full trunk. And then we're going to need to change some things up here on the front end because we're going to be doing an aftermarket front suspension. There's a rear suspension to go with it too, but the rear is mostly going to be stock sheet metal, whereas the front we're going to be modifying the sheet metal quite a bit. We're also changing the pedal box and steering column, a few other pieces. So some of those parts haven't arrived yet, but we're going to concentrate initially on getting the floors replaced and getting the wheel tubs in. Once that's done, we'll line up for the rear taillight panel, and finally we'll finish up with quarter panels at the back. Somewhere in that same time period, we'll start on the sheet metal at the front, but I want to get the floors in first, and we may have a little bit of rust up here in the front frame rail, and if we do, we'll know when we get that floor out, we can fix that and then put a new floor in it. So that's initially what we've got. I've already installed quite a bit of bracing already. This is all just 3/4 square tube. I'm going to add a little bit more bracing just to tie everything together. It also gives me, I use a few mounting points, and I'll show you some footage off my phone. This piece is removable. It bolts in up here at the trunk hinges. So we just made a brace, an X-brace, and then it bolts in back here on both sides. And really this is just to help locate this rear panel as we start to go back together. It gives us the proper distance from here to here on both sides, and then across. Now obviously the bolt holes are already pre-drilled, but this will still allow us to basically set that panel in place and have some fixture to line it up. And additionally, on the inside we've got it all X-braced, and that's welded in. That's because the entire floor is coming out. And then you'll see up here we have a plate with a couple holes in it, and that mounts to the transmission tunnel. So I'm going to go on each side from the seatbelt hole up to our bracing here and put a couple of pieces in, just so that as we go to put this floor in, we have something to essentially hook it to and know that we've got the proper height within the car. And that's just an aid, a cheat, because we're basically going to be, you know, going back in over the wells. The inner rockers and the outer rockers on this car are good, so it wouldn't be too difficult to find. But that just gives us a little aid to help hold that up in place, the whole floor up in place, while we're getting everything situated. So a little bit more bracing to do, and then we'll be ready to start cutting some floor out. You'll also be seeing, I've called in my buddy Robin again, and so you'll be seeing him in and out of a lot of these videos. He'll be here quite a bit, helping with this project and some others here in the shop until we get some of this stuff done and rolling out. So I'm going to get started. All right, you can see the extra braces I put in there, and really those are more just to locate those bolt holes for the new floor. That just helps us get everything aligned. And then the next thing we need to think about as we're doing this is I've got to probably do a repair on this panel, but on that panel it's going to have to come out completely. But if you look at the metal here real close, this floor overlaps the transmission and it also overlaps this rear hump. So the way this floor was put in was the hump was put in, the firewall was put in, and then this floor was put in. And we're not going to be able to put it back in that same order because of all this structure. Because obviously what they did was they set this on a jig, they set the firewall on a jig, and then they put the floor on the jig and lined everything up. And we got to do it all within the body. So what we're going to do is cut the floor out all the way around and just get as close to the seams as we can, and then we'll come back in, and you can see where I've already marked a whole lot of the different spot welds. We'll come back in and cut all those out, and when we go to put the floor back in, we'll put this piece in first. Well, I say we'll repair this piece and replace it. We'll repair this piece, then we'll put this piece in, and then we'll finish with the hump and the trunk floor. So we'll work our way from the front to the back, replacing pieces, and we're gonna just cut stuff out as we're ready to get rid of it and get it out of our way. So now what we're gonna do is remove out the bulk of the sheet metal and get most of this floor out of here. And we're gonna do that with a plasma cutter. Then we'll come back and start working on all those tack welds we gotta remove. Alright, so we used a plasma cutter, cut out as much of the floor chunks. This piece is actually in pretty good shape. The riser, we have new ones, but I need to drill out welds on this inner rocker to remove it. So rather than just cut it, I'll probably save it just in case we need parts of it. Or the rest of this is kind of a little more surgical than a plasma cutter is going to do, and we'll drill a bunch of these out and get them out of the way. We've got a whole bunch of the spot welds drilled out now. Still have a couple feet here and that corner over there to get, and then we'll come back and clean up the rails and any surface rust or anything in here. We'll come in with a spot blaster and clean those up and then paint all of that. The intention is to stave the cross member here and the front frame rails. But we do have, not only do we have new rear frame rails, but we also have subframe connectors, so those will all go in, but we'll just keep kind of plugging away at it here. So I've got this floor, or the front of the car, supported off of the pinch welds on both sides right here. You can see that one. And then in the front, I've got a mount that attaches to the front cross member where the suspension bolts in. So in the rear, I've been using a couple of the body mount locations, like where Ford would have set this up on a jig, and I've got all those measurements. Problem is, we're taking all of that out, so I really need to come in, weld up some new rear body mounts or body supports off of my jig, so that we can take all of that out and not have the body going all over the place, because we're going to have to be able to move our mounting points out of the way, or our support points out of the way, while we're doing that rear half. So I think I'm going to kind of stop here. I'm getting tired of drilling spot welds and all that. It needs to be done, it's just time consuming. But I think I'm going to stop here for now and go ahead and build up some kind of supports on the rear of the body. Probably going to just have to come to the rocker panels, because that's about the end of the rocker panel is about the end of what's going to be existing when I'm done cutting stuff off. So I think I'm just going to do that, and then we'll come back to this a little later. Back here you can kind of see what I'm referring to. This support is into one of the factory holes that would have been used to jig up the body, and then this one is mounted to where the rear leaf spring mounts, and that's all going away. So we've got it located front to rear, left to right, so I can just loosen up a bolt here, drop this out of the way, and then I can work on this back here and be able to come right back to it. We'll just put a mark here where we know this needs to be at the right height, and the same on this one. But what I think I'm going to do is come off, make a little plate and tack weld it to the bottom of the rocker panel, and then weld it to my frame jig here, just so that the body doesn't move while I move this stuff out of the way, because the rocker panel ends here and all of this is coming out. We're going to leave the inner structure, but everything else in there is coming out. So we need to have some pretty good support back here so that we can put all this stuff back in without the car moving all over the place. We're going to wash out this lead across here. If I turn on my bottles. As I'm doing this, I'm trying to keep the heat off the roof skin as much as possible. We don't care about the skin, so we're going to get it hotter, and that should help get the majority of the lead out of there. And we'll have to put some heat up on that other just to melt it out. That's pretty much all there is to it. There's enough heat in this panel, it warps right through here, so you can see you're gonna have to get pretty warm. But we've kept, for the most part, we've kept the heat out of the roof skin, and it hasn't tried to warp or buckle or anything. But now we can see all of our spot welds. We'll come back and drill all those out. And we can do the other side and get rid of most of this C-pillar. Now the other thing to note is all that lead, even if you're not an environmentalist or whatever, all that lead will contaminate ground soil and all that. So you need to dispose of that properly, and just check with your local landfill or whatever. Ours has a metals depository, so at ours I can take steels and coppers and other stuff like that, and they recycle them. I believe they also accept lead, so I'll be contacting them to dispose of this. I used to just collect it in a big bucket and we'd make fishing weights and other stuff out of it, but kind of gotten past that. Anyway, let's get the other side done and then we'll come back and start drilling these out. right, well, that's as far as I'm going to get for now. We're going to have to get on the inside and pull out the last little scrap of metal there. We can start drilling out all these spot welds and take this piece off.